Commander stood in the observation chamber of the research vessel, looking down at the planet called 442b. The world was not special. Brown deserts stretched across one hemisphere. Green forests covered another. The collective had studied thousands of worlds like this one, but this particular world held something that the Galactic Council wanted to understand better. Humans lived here. The assignment had come 3 weeks ago. The Council wanted a detailed study of human combat capabilities. They wanted to know if humans posed any real threat to galactic stability, had been chosen because of reputation as a careful observer and logical thinker. The Council believed humans were primitive. They believed human soldiers were undisciplined and weak, had simply been asked to confirm these facts. Was a species that had existed for 50,000 years. They had built starships when humans still lived in caves. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Their technology was so advanced that younger species could barely understand how it worked. Had studied many developing species. Each time the pattern was the same. Young species were inferior. Young species made mistakes. Young species were easy to predict and easy to control. The observation vessel descended through 442b's atmosphere. Below, a human military base came into view. It was called Forward Station 7. Humans had built it on a plateau overlooking a vast desert valley. The base was small and poorly defended. The walls were made of simple metal. The weapons were crude compared to what no other species possessed. There were perhaps 500 human soldiers here, maybe fewer. Landed the vessel in a designated area. Human soldiers appeared immediately, moving with rifles ready. They looked even smaller than had expected. Humans were fragile creatures. Their bodies could be destroyed easily. They lived only 100 years or so, a blink of time yet here they were, taking weapons into their hands, ready to fight. A woman approached as they stepped down from the vessel. She was tall for a human with dark hair pulled back tightly. She wore a military uniform with marks on her shoulder that showed rank. This was Captain Hayes, had studied human military structure. This woman was a leader of soldiers. Captain Hayes held up her hand in a gesture of peace, understood the gesture. Humans used many such signals. They seemed to need them because they could not simply broadcast thoughts like they could. Humans had to use sounds and movements to communicate. It was a primitive system, but it worked. "Welcome to Forward Station 7, Hayes said. Her voice was strong but not loud. "I understand you are here to observe our military operations." Used a translation device to respond. The device converted thought patterns into human speech. "I am commander of the collective. I will observe your soldiers and your methods. I will report my findings to the Galactic Council." Hayes nodded. She did not seem uncomfortable with being studied. "Come with me, I will show you the base." Over the next hours, Hayes led through Forward Station 7, saw the barracks where soldiers slept, the kitchens where they ate simple food, the command center where officers planned strategy, the weapons storage, the medical facilities. Everything was basic and functional. Nothing was elegant or particularly well designed. The humans seemed to make things work through effort rather than through intelligent planning. In the command center, Hayes introduced to her other officers. Lieutenant was second in command. He was younger than Hayes but moved with confidence. Corporal Foster was the chief medic. She had kind eyes but strong hands. Private Aaron Brooks was a new soldier, barely more than a boy in human terms. He was nervous around but tried to hide it. "What exactly will you be observing?" Hayes asked as they stood over a map table. "Your military capabilities," said. "The way your soldiers fight, your tactics, your weapons. The Galactic Council wishes to understand if humans represent any threat to the established order." Hayes smiled slightly. It was a strange expression. Her lips curved upward. Had learned this meant amusement or pleasure. "And what is your initial assessment?" Was honest. "You are outmatched. Your weapons are inferior. Your numbers are limited. Your defensive position is adequate but not superior. If a major force attacked this base, I estimate you would lose between 70 and 80% of your personnel. Hayes did not seem bothered by this prediction. They have been making moves in this sector, she said. We expect an attack within weeks. When it comes, we will be ready. Found this statement illogical. How could they be ready if they would certainly lose? But did not question it. The purpose was to observe, not to engage in debate. That evening stood on the upper platform of the base, watching the sun set over the desert. The soldiers moved past, going about their duties. They joked with each other. They laughed. One soldier threw an object for another soldier to catch. They seemed to enjoy meaningless activities. Below the platform, Private Brooks was cleaning a rifle. He was new and still learning. He made mistakes. He took the weapon apart incorrectly. Lieutenant walked over and showed him the right way. Brooks thanked, simply nodded and walked away. There was no reward for this teaching, no payment, simply did it because Brooks needed help. Found this behavior strange. They worked together because logic demanded cooperation. But these humans seemed to work together for reasons that had nothing to do with logic. They seemed to enjoy being near each other. They seemed to care about each other's success. Over the next days, settled into the observation routine, was given a small room in the base. A computer terminal was provided so could write reports. Every day, watched the soldiers train. They practiced combat movements. They learned to use their weapons. They studied strategy and tactics. They were not bad soldiers, had to admit this in the reports. They were disciplined when discipline was required. They could follow orders. They could execute plans, but they lacked the precision of other species' militaries. They made emotional decisions. They trusted each other beyond what logic would allow. They were willing to take risks that should have seemed foolish, but could see that these humans were willing to die. They would not run away when facing superior force. They would stay and fight and accept death as a possibility. This was different from many species. Many species would retreat rather than face certain defeat. These humans seemed to view retreat as worse than death. Did not yet understand why. One night stood in the command center while Captain Hayes reviewed reports. The human woman looked tired. She had been working for 16 hours without rest. This was another strange human quality. They could continue working even when their bodies were failing. They ran on determination alone. "The will come soon," Hayes said. She was speaking to but also to herself. "And we will be ready." Had already written this assumption in the report sent to the Galactic Council. Humans seemed to always say they were ready, even when logic said they could not be. Was beginning to understand that the Galactic Council had made an assumption. The Council thought humans would be easy to predict. The Council thought humans would behave like other species. But something in observations suggested this assumption might be wrong. The attack came 3 days later. The alarms began at dawn. Red lights flashed across every screen in the command center. The sensors had detected incoming ships, not 1 or 2, not even 10. The count rose as watched. 20 vessels approached from the east, 30, 40. They had come with overwhelming force. Watched from the observation platform, recording everything. Captain Hayes moved through the command center with controlled precision. She did not panic. Her voice remained calm as she gave orders. Within minutes, every soldier in the base knew what was coming. The human soldiers moved to their positions. They did not run. They did not show fear. They simply moved into place and made ready their weapons. Counted the human force again. 517 soldiers. Against them came nearly 5,000 warriors. The mathematics was simple. The humans were outmatched at least 10 to 1. The first ships dropped from the sky. They were massive vessels built for combat. They were covered in weapons that made the human base's defenses look like toys. They began their assault with heavy bombardment. Buildings exploded. The earth shook. Dust and smoke rose into the air until it was hard to see. But the humans had prepared. They had dug trenches and tunnels. They had hidden weapons in the rocks. They had studied the terrain, and they knew every advantage it offered. As the soldiers began landing, they found themselves not in an easy conquest but in a fighting retreat. Captain Hayes directed everything from the command center. She had maps of the base. She could see where they were landing. She could see where her soldiers were positioned. She made decisions quickly and sent them out through the communication system. Some of her soldiers would need to move to different positions. Some would need to provide covering fire for others. Some would be asked to hold ground they could not possibly hold forever. Realize something that was not in any military textbook. Hayes was not trying to win this battle. She was trying to survive it. She was trying to keep as many of her soldiers alive as possible while delaying for as long as possible. This was a different kind of fighting than had expected to see. The warriors were stronger than humans. They were larger. Their armor was thicker. Their weapons were better. But the humans had something they did not seem to understand. The humans had practiced fighting on their home world. They knew this terrain. They knew how to use it. When a soldier tried to climb the steep rock face to attack a human position, the humans were waiting. They dropped explosive devices that killed the warriors. When ships tried to land too close to the base, human soldiers appeared from hidden tunnels and fired weapons at the ships until they had to retreat. But the humans were also bleeding. Could see this from the observation platform. Soldiers fell. Some stood back up. Some did not. The human medic, Corporal Foster, moved across the battlefield like a ghost. She was in every place where soldiers were wounded. She carried first aid supplies and knowledge of how to stop bleeding. She moved from one dying soldier to another, and she would not stop. Watched as Foster took shrapnel from an explosion. Blood covered her arm, but Foster simply wrapped the wound quickly and continued helping other soldiers. She did not stop. She did not slow down. When another soldier near her was hit, Foster covered that soldier with her own body to protect him from more fire. The battle continued through the morning and into the afternoon. The reinforcements kept coming. More warriors, more weapons, but the humans kept fighting. They did not break. They did not surrender. They did not run. Private Brooks did something that caught attention. The young soldier was in a defensive position with two other human soldiers. They were advancing from 3 different directions. It was clear they would all die if they stayed. Brooks stood up. He fired his weapon at the to his left, drawing all their attention. The fire that came back was intense. It hit Brooks in the shoulder and the leg, but he stayed standing and kept firing. He kept the attention on himself long enough for the other 2 soldiers to escape to a safer position. Then Brooks fell. Was certain the young human was dead, but Brooks was not dead. He dragged himself backward into the trenches. He left a trail of blood. He was missing part of his leg, but he was still alive and he was still fighting. A commander came to the base personally. It was a sign of confidence or arrogance or both. The commander was covered in armor that made him look like a walking building. He had weapons that could destroy half the base in seconds. The humans should have been terrified. Instead, Captain Hayes did something that seemed completely illogical too. She left the safety of the command center. She took a rifle and she went out onto the battlefield. She was walking toward the commander. Her soldiers saw this. They began following her. They left their positions and they moved toward the commander as one unit. This was suicide. This was foolish. The commander had weapons that could kill all of them instantly, but the humans did not stop. They moved toward the commander with determination in their faces. They moved like they were not afraid of death. They moved like they had decided that dying together was better than living apart. The commander fired his weapons. 3 of Hayes' soldiers fell immediately, but the others kept moving. Hayes did not stop. Her face was hard and cold. This was not the kind captain anymore. This was a woman who had chosen to fight to the end. Watch the recording from the observation platform. The data was being stored. The council would want to know everything. They would want to understand what happened, but already knew one thing that was not in any previous report about humans. The humans would not give up. They would fight even when winning was impossible. They would die for each other without hesitation. They would follow a captain who led them towards certain death, and they would do it willingly. The commander realized this too. The human attack had disrupted the assault. The commander's soldiers were confused. They were not used to enemies who would charge directly at superior force. The commander retreated from the direct attack. As evening came, the fighting was not over, but it had changed. They had realized that conquering this base was not going to be quick or easy. The humans had proven they would hold on and keep fighting no matter what the cost was, and understood that the Galactic Council's assumption about humans had been completely wrong. The second day of battle began with heavy rain. The clouds rolled in from the desert and covered the sky in darkness. They did not like this weather. Their thermal sensors did not work as well in rain. Their long-range weapons were less accurate. The humans knew this. They had studied their own world. They knew its weather patterns. They knew its advantages. Captain Hayes called together what remained of her command staff. 24 hours of fighting had cost them dearly. Nearly 100 soldiers were dead. Another 80 were wounded. They had started with 517. Now they had perhaps 300 who could still fight. They had lost soldiers too, but they had numbers they could afford to lose. "We cannot win by defending," Hayes said. Her voice was rough. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her mind was still sharp. "They have the numbers and the firepower. The longer we stay in the trenches, the more of them arrive. We need to change the fight." Lieutenant was standing beside her. His uniform was torn and burned in places. He had a bandage on his head, but his eyes were focused. "An attack," he said. It was not a question. "A targeted attack," Hayes confirmed. "They have a command center. If we can destroy it, we can disrupt their entire operation. They are trying to coordinate 5 different assault teams. Without coordination, they fall apart." Heard this conversation from the command center. Understood the logic now. Hayes was proposing a strike at the heart of the force. Such an attack would be extremely dangerous. It would require a small team to move across open ground through heavy fire to reach the command center. The chance of survival was almost zero. "I will lead it," Hayes said. Stepped forward immediately. "I will go with you." Corporal Foster, who had just finished treating wounded soldiers, spoke up. "And I will go as well." Others volunteered. The soldiers who had survived 2 days of brutal fighting volunteered to join a suicide mission, recorded their names, recorded their faces. These humans were not logical, but they were something else, something that had no word for. Hayes gathered the volunteers. She did not try to stop any of them. She did not tell them they were foolish or that their sacrifice would not matter. She simply said, "We move in 1 hour. The rain will help cover our movement. We will have one chance to do this. After that, whether we succeed or fail, the outcome is written." The human soldiers prepared for the attack. They checked their weapons. They loaded ammunition. Some wrote messages. Did not understand the purpose of this. If they died, who would read the messages? But the soldiers did it anyway. They needed to do it. It was a human need to leave something behind, even if no one would ever see it. As the hour passed, moved closer to observe. Private Aaron Brooks, the young soldier who had lost part of his leg the day before, approached Captain Hayes. His leg was wrapped and bandaged. He should not have been fighting at all. He should have been resting in the medical area. "Captain, I want to go with you," Brooks said. Hayes looked at the young man. "You cannot move well enough. You would slow the team down." "Then I will move faster," Brooks said. There was determination in his voice that was beyond his years. "I have done nothing but watch others fight since this started. I am going." Hayes did not argue further. She simply nodded. She had learned that arguing with humans who had made a decision was a waste of time. The decision was already made. Their minds would not change. The team moved out as the rain grew heavier. There were 12 of them. They moved like ghosts across the battlefield. The soldiers did not see them at first. The rain helped. The darkness helped, but they were moving toward the heart of the position. When they did see them, the fire came instantly. It was heavy fire from all directions. Soldiers appeared as if from nowhere. The human team took cover behind rocks and the broken pieces of destroyed buildings. They fired back. They killed soldiers, but they kept coming. Led a flanking movement. He took 3 soldiers with him and moved to strike them from the side. The movement was precise and fast, moved like he had thought about this attack 100 times. He probably had. The soldiers with him matched his movements perfectly. They moved as one unit. They struck the position and they killed a dozen enemy soldiers. But the commander realized what was happening. He moved his forces to stop the human attack. More soldiers came, more fire came, another human fell, then another. Hayes kept moving forward. She did not stop to help the fallen. She did not slow down. She moved like a force of nature. Behind her, Foster kept pace. The medic had no weapons for fighting, but she was there. She was moving with her captain toward the center of the battle. The command center was a heavily armored building. Soldiers guarded it. Heavy guns protected it. It seemed impossible to assault. But Hayes did not hesitate. She did not calculate odds. She simply moved forward, and her remaining soldiers followed. The assault was brutal and quick. Humans and died in close combat. Private Brooks, moving on his damaged leg, killed 2 soldiers before being knocked down. He got back up and kept fighting. The pain did not matter to him anymore. Only the fight mattered. And his team provided covering fire. They killed soldiers as they came. The humans were not stronger than they were not faster, but they were willing to die, and this gave them an advantage that no amount of technology could overcome. Hayes reached the command center. She placed an explosive device on the door. The explosion tore the door open. Inside, the commanders were still trying to coordinate their forces. They died before they could react. The assault collapsed almost immediately. Without the central command, the individual units could not coordinate. They began falling back. Some tried to retreat to their ships. Some fought but without purpose. Some simply stopped fighting and left the battlefield. The humans had won. But the cost was high. Of the 12 humans who had gone on the assault, only 6 returned to the base. Lieutenant was badly wounded in his side. Captain Hayes had burns from weapons fire that covered her left arm and shoulder. Corporal Foster was limping, her leg injured. Private Brooks, who should never have gone, was barely conscious from pain and blood loss. The surviving humans helped their wounded to the medical area. There was no celebration. There was no victory chanting. There was only exhaustion and the knowledge that the worst part of this fight was over. Had been recording everything, every moment, every death, every act of courage, but was beginning to understand something that no measurement or data could capture. These humans had won not because they had a better plan or better weapons. They had won because they had proven they would die for each other. Could accept defeat. The humans would not accept losing each other. In the end, that made the difference. They were gone by afternoon. Their remaining ships had lifted off from 442B and jumped to faster-than-light travel. They had left behind wreckage and bodies. They had left behind a defeated force that could no longer threaten Forward Station 7. But they had also left something else. They had left proof that humans were more dangerous than any species in the Galactic Council had realized. Walked across the battlefield as the rain stopped falling. The destruction was total. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. The trenches that the humans had dug were filled with bodies. The defensive walls had been torn apart by massive weapons fire. It looked like nothing could have survived here, but the humans had survived. Not all of them, but enough had survived to hold the position and defeat the enemy. The human soldiers moved across the battlefield in the aftermath. Some were collecting the bodies of fallen comrades. Some were treating the wounded. Some were simply standing and looking at what remained of their base. Their faces showed exhaustion beyond what physical tiredness could explain. They had been pushed past every limit. They had seen friends die. They had killed enemies. They had come face to face with death, and they had chosen to keep fighting anyway. Corporal Foster was in the medical area, treating the most severely wounded. She had no bandage on her own leg anymore. Could see the injury, but Foster was ignoring it. She moved from one patient to another, checking vital signs, applying medicine, speaking quiet words to soldiers who were in pain or unconscious. Private Brooks was lying on a medical platform. His left leg had been cut off below the knee. He had lost massive amounts of blood. By all reasonable estimates, he should be dead, but he was alive. His eyes were open. He was looking up at the ceiling of the medical tent, and he was thinking about something. Could see this. The young soldier was conscious and thinking and living despite all the damage done to his body. Captain Hayes was in a different medical area. Her left arm was heavily bandaged. Burns covered her shoulder and part of her face. She had received injuries that would mark her permanently, but she was sitting up. She was conscious, and she was looking at reports about her remaining soldiers. Approached Hayes. The captain looked up from the reports. She saw the observer, and something passed across her face. Recognition, perhaps, understanding that had watched everything. That would report everything to the Galactic Council. "Commander," Hayes said. She did not try to stand. She did not have the strength for it. "I assume you have been gathering information about our capabilities." Considered how to respond. The observer was trained to remain objective, but objectivity was becoming difficult. What it seen could not be described with simple data. It required understanding. It required emotion. "I have gathered all the information," said. "I have recorded every moment, every soldier, every decision, every outcome." Hayes nodded slowly. "And what is your assessment now? Still the same, still believing we are outmatched and weak?" Sat down in a chair near Hayes. The human woman had many right to demand answers. She had revealed her deepest strengths and her deepest vulnerabilities to the observer. "No," said, "my assessment has changed completely." "How so?" Hayes asked. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp. She was still a leader, even lying wounded in a medical tent. Chose the words carefully. "You do not fight to win, not truly, you fight to protect each other. This changes everything about how you should be understood. The Galactic Council studies warfare using models based on logic, territory, resources, power, but your species fights using something else, something the Council does not have a word for." Hayes was quiet for a moment, then she asked, "Do you understand it now? Do you understand why we do this?" Thought of Private Brooks, missing a leg but still living. Thought of Corporal Foster, treating wounds even though she was wounded herself. Thought of Lieutenant leading a suicide assault to protect his friends. Thought of Captain Hayes walking toward an enemy commander without hesitation. "I am beginning to understand," said, "but the understanding is not complete. I am not human. I cannot feel what humans feel." "You are right," Hayes said. "You cannot feel it, but maybe you can understand it through logic. Let me explain something. Every soldier in this base volunteered to be here. They knew the would come. They knew the odds were against us. They knew that many of them would die, but they stayed. They stayed because we are a family. A military unit becomes a family. We eat together. We train together. We sleep in the same area. We share fear and hope together." When you spend enough time with people, you stop thinking of them as individuals. You start thinking of them as extensions of yourself. Hayes paused. Her face showed pain, but she continued speaking. "No one wanted to be the soldier who abandoned their family to save themselves. So we all stayed. We all fought. Not because we were brave, not because we were stupid, but because the thought of living without each other was worse than the thought of dying together." Process this explanation. It was logical in a way that had not previously considered. The humans had created a system where each individual's survival was tied to the group's survival. The failure of the group would mean the psychological death of every individual. So the group fought as a single organism to survive. "The do not have this," said. "Their soldiers fight because they are ordered to fight. They will retreat if it is logical to retreat. Exactly, Hayes said. Your species fights because of rules and commands. We fight because of love, and love is a stronger force than any command could ever be. Over the next days, continue to observe. The humans did not celebrate their victory immediately. Instead, they held a ceremony for the dead. They gathered in a large open area and they spoke about the soldiers who had died. They told stories. They cried. They touched each other in ways that seemed to help with the pain. Asked why they did this. We honor them, one soldier said. They died for us. We honor them by remembering them. We honor them by living. Began to understand what the Galactic Council had missed. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons. Humans were dangerous because they would die for people they loved. They would sacrifice everything, and they would do it willingly. This made them unpredictable. This made them powerful. This made them terrifying to any enemy. Looked at the soldiers gathering around Corporal Foster. She was telling them about Private Brooks, who would live but would never walk properly again. She was telling them that Brooks had chosen to come on the assault because he was part of the family. The soldiers listened and they nodded. They understood. They would have done the same thing. Began writing the final observations in the report. The Galactic Council would not want to hear these conclusions. The Council believed humans were primitive and weak, but had seen something different, had seen a strength that transcended technology, a strength that came from within, and knew that everything the Galactic Council believed about humans was wrong. The observation vessel left 442B 3 weeks after the battle, had waited for the human wounded to stabilize, had waited for the base to recover enough to function again, had waited to gather all the data that the Galactic Council would demand. But eventually, the time came to leave. Before departure, Captain Hayes had visited. She was still in pain. The burns on her face and arm would scar, but she had come to say goodbye to the observer. "Will you tell them the truth?" Hayes had asked. "Will you tell the Council what really happened here?" Had answered honestly, "I will tell them what I observed. What they choose to believe is beyond my control." Hayes had nodded. "Then I trust you to speak truthfully." The journey back to the Galactic Council's main station took 4 weeks. During this time, reviewed all the data, all the recordings, all the observations. The report was being written, but knew that numbers and statistics would not be enough. The Council needed to hear the story. They needed to understand the context. They needed to grasp what it meant to fight against an enemy that was willing to die. The Galactic Council chamber was a vast dome. Representatives from 100 species sat in semicircles facing a central speaking platform. The oldest counselors sat in the front rows. These beings had lived for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They believed they understood everything about warfare and power. Stood in the center of the chamber. The report was displayed on screens behind. Data about the human soldiers, data about the force, data about the casualties, data about the weapons used, data about the terrain, all of it presented in the logical format that the Council preferred. "The humans won the battle," began. "This is fact. Against a force 10 times their size, the humans defeated the attack. The Council sent me to determine if humans pose a threat to galactic stability. I am here to report my findings." A counselor from the front row interrupted. "Your findings are displayed before us. The humans had superior positioning and used terrain effectively. We already understand this. Is there something unusual to report?" "Yes," said. "Something very unusual. The humans won not because of terrain or tactical advantage. They won because they were willing to accept death as a price of victory. This is different from all other species I have studied." The council chamber filled with talking. Several counselors spoke at once. A representative stood up, his anger clear in his movements. A counselor made dismissive gestures. Only the oldest beings remained quiet, watching with something that looked like interest. "Explain this claim," demanded the council chairman, an ancient being whose species had long since been forgotten by younger races. Present evidence. Activated the recordings. The video from the battlefield appeared on the screens. The humans in trenches, facing overwhelming fire and not retreating. Private Brooks, wounded and still fighting. Captain Hayes walking toward the commander without fear. Corporal Foster treating wounded soldiers while bleeding herself. The assault team knowing they might not return and going anyway. "This is not unusual," a counselor said. "Any species will fight when cornered. When escape is impossible, they fight." "They could have surrendered," said. "They would have accepted surrender. The humans could have lived. Instead, they fought until they had killed enough to force a retreat. They chose fighting and death over living as slaves." An old council member named Zephyr spoke for the first time. Zephyr was ancient. Zephyr had been observing galactic affairs for 10,000 years. When Zephyr spoke, even other old beings listened. "This behavior has been noted before in humans. Tell us, Commander, what is your assessment of the threat level?" Gathered the thoughts. This question was important. The answer would influence how the Galactic Council would treat humans in the future. "Humans are the most dangerous species the Council has encountered," said. "Not because of their weapons. Their weapons are inferior. Not because of their numbers. Their numbers are limited. They are dangerous because they will die for what they believe in. They form bonds that are stronger than self-preservation. They will sacrifice themselves for friends. They will accept death rather than betray those they care about." The chamber erupted in noise. Some counselors were angry. Some were afraid. Some seemed to be calculating what this meant for their own interests. "You are overstating the case," another counselor said. "Humans are a young species. Give them time and they will become like all other species. Self-interested, logical, driven by resources and power." "Perhaps," acknowledged. "Or perhaps they will always maintain this quality. Perhaps this is the core of what it means to be human. I cannot predict which outcome is true, but I can report what I observed." An emergency vote was called. The council debated for hours about what to do with this information. Some wanted to simply ignore it and continue treating humans as an inferior species. Some wanted to attack humans before they became a real threat. Some wanted to make alliance with humans. Some wanted to maintain distance and observation. In the end, the council made a decision. A new policy regarding humans was established. The words were simple and direct. Humans were to be treated with respect and caution. Any attack on human territories would be considered an attack on the Galactic Council itself. Any attempt to conquer humans would be met with full galactic force. Humans would be invited to join the Council as equals if they chose to do so. It was a remarkable decision. In the history of the Galactic Council, no species had been granted such status without first proving themselves through technological advancement and military superiority over thousands of years. But the Council understood something from its report. Humans had already proven themselves, not through technology, but through something deeper and more important. They had proven that they would never be conquered, and an unconquerable species must be treated as equals. Left the council chamber after the vote. The work was complete, but was thinking about Captain Hayes, about Private Brooks, about Corporal Foster, was thinking about the soldiers of Forward Station 7 and what they had accomplished. They had changed the course of galactic history without ever knowing it. They had fought for each other, and in doing so, they had earned the respect of the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy. 6 months later, returned to 442b. Captain Hayes was surprised to see the Observer, brought news of the vote, news that humans had been invited to join the Galactic Council, news that the future had changed. Hayes listened carefully, then she smiled. "So we changed your mind about us." "You did more than that," said. "You changed the Council's mind. You changed the course of galactic history. You did this not through superior weapons or greater numbers. You did this by loving each other more than you feared death." Hayes looked back toward her soldiers. They were rebuilding the base. They were laughing together and working together. They were the same people who had fought and bled and nearly died, but they were also different. They were no longer trying to survive. They were no longer trying to prove something. They were simply living, simply being human. That, Hayes said, is what we have always done. We have simply been human, and apparently that is enough. Stood and watched them work. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the observer understood something that had never been understood before. They had been logical, they had been rational, they had been powerful, but they had never been truly strong. True strength, realized, came from the willingness to die for others. True strength came from love. The humans had it, the did not, and now the entire galaxy knew it. The story ends with standing at the edge of the human base, watching soldiers work in the sun. In the distance, new human ships were being built. Humans would soon join the greater galactic community, but they would never lose what made them human. They would never lose their ability to care deeply, to love fiercely, to die for those they cared about. And that, understood now, was the most powerful force in the universe. It was the force that would one day make humans the true leaders of the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple human ability to love each other more than they loved themselves. They had learned a profound truth on 442b. The young species that the Council had dismissed as primitive had actually been the most advanced all along. They had advanced in the way that mattered most. They had advanced in their ability to be human. And that was something no amount of technology could ever achieve.